Testing, check, check, 1, 2, 3. Hello. Hello, welcome to the Ninja Robot Studio LLC stream, where I play video games and VR experiences and talk through them from a UX designer's perspective. Game development has a heavy and direct influence on XR development, so it makes sense that we would study game design to give us a greater understanding of how to design quality immersive experiences. And the plan is to have all of you in the chat participate, and that way we can learn together. And you don't have to be in person at the time of Twitch. It does help because then I can actively talk to you and we can talk back and forth. And however, you can still participate asynchronously through YouTube. I've posted our YouTube in the chat so that you can see that you can watch these on demand later and participate in the chat that way. And I do check the comments and I do respond to them. So it doesn't have to be live, but it is much more beneficial to be live. There are a lot of classes out there on UX design and UX processes and so forth. And more classes are coming out around designing for XR. And think of this as more of a kind of an unofficial and less academic and less expensive university labs class for UX for XR. We're going to use critical thinking here in our design analysis. It's not just playing games to play games and have fun. We are critically thinking through it from a UX design perspective. And my goal is to help you gain practical experience in this method as you participate in the chat. And you can check out the widgets on my Twitch page. Let me share that with you real quick. And in the About section, you'll see that there is this section called Rose, Thorn, Bud, and that is the method that we're going to be using in this class, or in this stream, to think through the games that I play. And this is different than a full heuristic evaluation that you would do professionally. We don't have the time for that in this stream. That is a very in-depth process, and honestly, something that should be a paid thing to do. It is very in-depth. Maybe someday, but not for this stream. But this Rose, Thorn, Bud method is a very quick and simple method that can be used for lots of things, not just analyzing games. It can be used for processes to think through how something went, how an experience went, whatever that experience is. It could have been a meeting. It could have been a project that you worked on with other people. How did you work with your team? How did this software experience go? How your interactions with the software and VR experiences, and that's what we're going to be using here today. It's a quick and simple method for critically thinking about experiences. And this whole setup of the stream on Thursdays is experimental. and I will be learning and iterating on the format as I go and as you guys give me feedback. So please do feel free to give feedback and say, hey, it might be better if we do this, and I'll consider reformatting it as we go. And so now we are talking through one of the books that we use besides the UX Rexar Toolkit, which is the one that I write. The VR book is one that I recommend that you check out. That one is a bit more expensive, but it is a very good book, specifically about VR and about human-centered design for VR. That is it's a pretty thick book. It's pretty academic, but it is a good one to have on your shelf as reference if you have the funds to get that one. It's very good. It definitely is a textbook. And the one that we use for this stream is The Gamer's Brain by Celia Hodent. And she just wrote a new book called, that I haven't got yet, The Psychology of Video Games. Are video games good or bad for players? But the one that we're looking at is The Gamer's Brain, which is also around neuroscience. Neuroscience and UX can impact video game design. And that's the one that we use for this stream. So let's start talking through that. But before we do that, I wanted to follow up on something from last week. Last week we played Mariposa and the Galaxy Man, which is an early access indie game from local to me, Houston area group that made that game. A young group of indie developers and designers. So, which I suggest, it's free on Steam to check out, the alpha early access, and I do recommend that you check it out. Support your local indie makers. But there was a follow-up from last week that I had around colorblindness emulators for the PC. I had mentioned colorblindness because I was wondering about the contrast of some of the visuals and how you can test that if you're designing games and visual design specifically. How can you test for colorblindness? And all of the tools. So I'm primarily a Mac user, and there is this excellent tool on the Mac called Sim Daltonism, which I mention here. Sim Daltonism, which is a software that you can download for the Mac, and it will create this overlay window, and then you can choose which type of colorblindness to emulate, and it will show your screen based on what that colorblindness type is. But I haven't been able to find anything like that for the PC, and especially not for VR. Now, there is an experience that you can get that I can't remember off the top of my head what it's called, where you can go into the experience and experience colorblindness from their perspective, but it's not something that you can use to test your apps for colorblindness. And if people know if there is something that you can do that for Unity, if people are developing in Unity or Unreal, then is there a plugin that you can test your experiences for the different types of colorblindness to make sure that you are creating them well? I know that Photoshop has built-in tools, so if you're creating your visuals in Photoshop, you can test in there as you're creating them, but not everyone uses Photoshop. So are there other tools, and are there tools that you can use to test various things, that even including after development, do they support colorblindness, especially if you're assessing something that you want to use for your group of people or your company? You want to assess these things. Does it even account for colorblindness, especially if there are more people out there with visual impairments than we realize. I have visual impairments myself, and you want to take that into account. So I was looking for a colorblindness emulator for the PC, and I still have not been able to find one. I did find one on the Microsoft Store, but it's a few years old. I wound up uninstalling it because I wasn't happy with it, but it basically did the same thing that Sim Daltonism did. However, it was not usable. I couldn't figure out. So what happened was I installed it and it looked like, hey, this is great. And it had all the little, it had some tooltips to the side, a window of tooltips to the side that said, this is how you switch between your different, which is a poor, you should just have an interface and let people choose from a drop down or from a menu or something of, which is what Sim Daltonism does. But this one just had a window of tooltips to the side that said this is how you switch between your different views and stuff. And however, once I started messing with that, the tooltips went away and I couldn't get them back. So I couldn't figure out how to get back. I couldn't remember what tooltip did what, and I couldn't bring back that window to, because I couldn't find it because there was no interface allowing me to switch between views or anything. I had to just immediately memorize these keyboard commands, and I had no way of bringing them back. And that is a terrible experience. It is not a good user experience at all. And I just wound up uninstalling it altogether because it was unusable at that point. But it was the closest thing I could find to what I was looking for, which is a kind of a clear window that you can put over something, an experience or anything over your screen, and emulate different types of color blindness to see, does my design have enough contrast? Are the colors clear enough and different enough to help? Does it hurt or hinder? And that is something I'm still searching for. If you know something, please feel free to. I've tried a few, but they're not doing exactly what I want. The only thing that I can find right now that you can use for PC is just taking a screenshot of something and then uploading it to a website. And then that website will analyze it and then tell you whether or not it's good or bad. And that's not as efficient as turning on an emulator and going through an experience and just watching it and seeing it. If you want those numbers, it'll give you those numbers. That's great. But if you're just wanting to visually see, hey, is this working, not working, then that's not a very efficient way of doing it. So my hope is that someone will come out, hey, if you're a software developer and you're watching this, please check out Sim Daltonism and make something like it for the PC. I will be very grateful. Or if you know something, do let me know. And so that was from last week. So I still haven't found anything. I am still interested in finding something for a color blindness emulation so that we can test that. But I haven't found it yet, at least not in the format that I'm wanting in my brain. But I'm wondering, is there something in the film industry? How do you analyze your films when you're doing film editing and stuff? Because then you could essentially, I guess, record yourself playing through the game and then put that through that film thing, that film emulator, to see, hey, is this working, not working? That would be another option that I don't know about because I'm not big in the film industry. But if there is something like that, that would be awesome. So let's talk about gaming UX. Before we get into the pillars of gaming, every time before we play a game, we think about the pillars of gaming UX so they're fresh in our brain when we're going into the game. Before that, though, I do want to take a moment to read out of the gamer's brain a little bit of the content. The last few weeks, we've been talking about some of the misconceptions around UX for gaming. And a couple weeks ago, we talked about the misconception that UX will distort the design intents and make gameplay easier. So if you want to check that one out, that was a couple of weeks ago. It's on my YouTube channel if you want to check it out, and I'll re-enter that YouTube link in the chat for people, and the link is also in the About section on Twitch as well. But that was a couple weeks ago, and then this last week, while I was doing Mariposa and the Galaxy Man, I talked about UX, the misconception that UX will restrict the creativity of the team, and then we read a little essay from Kim Libreri at Epic Games where she said that UX is not the enemy of creativity. And a highlight from that is UX analysis gives us the tools to have an unbiased scientific view on how our consumers are reacting to our product. And it has proven to be a reliable and mostly frictionless mechanism for fine-tuning content. And that was what we talked about last week. So this week, we're going to do another misconception. Misconception number 3 from her book is UX is yet another opinion. And so let me read what Celia has to say about this. Celia Hoden, if you don't know who she is, she was, I don't know if she still is, but if you check out my YouTube channel, I think I have a link to her channel. I'm not sure. I think I do. But she used to work for, she's a game designer. She used to work for, here, I'll just read about it. She's recognized as a leader in the application of user experience in psychology and video game design, and then the development of UX strategy and process in game studios. She has a PhD in psychology from the University of Paris Sorbonne, France, where she specialized in cognitive development. She has also, she's done a lot of speaking on the topic of gaming UX and psychology for gaming, and on ethical games, which is very interesting. I need to look more into what she's been doing around ethical games, because I am very interested in that. But she has worked for LucasArts, Epic Games, Ubisoft, Montreal, Ubisoft Paris. She's worked on Fortnite and Rainbow Six, Star Wars 1313, Paragon, and so forth. So she has a lot of experience in the gaming industry and is a good authority on the space. So we're learning from her. I have more of experience on the serious games side of things, working at the enterprise level on serious games, so training with consequences. That's more on my side. So I'm not on the gaming side of things, so I'm learning. And so that's the point of this stream, is that we are learning this together. I have 22 years of experience designing and researching for UX for various platforms, but I don't have that experience in gaming, so we're learning this together. And a lot of the UX translates, because again, it's just another platform, but we have to think about what are the differences in this platform versus the other platforms that we're used to see how that applies. And of course, if you don't know, this is the UX for XR toolkit, which I've created, that talks about UX for specifically XR. And again, my experience is from the serious game side of things, and I've done extensive research and development on, or more prototyping on the XR side of things, more specifically VR, because I don't have access to mixed reality headsets anymore. So this is my resource that you have access to, and there is more content being added all the time. And I talk about the differences specifically in what is the difference between UX for your traditional UX, your 2D apps, versus here, VR. This is a different world. It's a different way of testing things. So what would you want to specifically do differently in this space for that, for XR? But I haven't done entertainment side of things, so that's what we're studying here. And that has a little bit of a different need than your serious games because there's a different reason that you play these games. You want to be entertained. And so that requires different things that we need to think about besides our traditional usability. So let's get back to Celia Hodent. I went off on a tangent. So misconception number 3 from her book, The Gamer's Brain, is that UX is yet another opinion. So making games usually requires coordination from many professionals, and in large studios, the game development team might have to deal with many opinions from within the game team itself, from the marketing team, from the publishing team, the executive team, the audience, and so on. Therefore, UX input can be perceived as yet another opinion that the game team has to deal with. And designers might particularly be apprehensive because they're used to everyone already believing they're a designer. I think she means UX designers might particularly have. As Richard Bartle in 2009 pointed out, game developers, whether they are executives, engineers, or artists, journalists, and players, all think they're designers. They will tirelessly give their opinion to the game and level designers about certain game mechanics or systems, what they should add or remove, why they believe the balance is off on a particular map, and so on. Just like many people believe they understand psychology because of their experience as human beings, people believe they understand design because of their experience with objects, applications, and video games as a user. This is not to say that non-designers should not give design feedback about the game, but this phenomenon can make some designers defensive. Artists can encounter the same issue because some people believe they understand art because they enjoy stories, comic books, and movies. Engineers are usually less bothered because non-coders can more easily recognize that they don't understand programming. However, engineers are impacted by another kind of issue. Many people don't understand why a modification that seems trivial would be such a big deal to code. That's a very common issue. Yeah. All in all, most game developers usually don't seek any more feedback than what they're already getting, which is often quite a lot. And UX practitioners can therefore be seen as yet another newcomer in opinion land. However, UX practitioners do not give opinions, as I often jokingly say to ease developers' worries. They provide an analysis based on their expertise and on data when it's available. The UX discipline is about using cognitive science knowledge and the scientific method to identify or anticipate issues that will negatively impact players' experience in a way that was not intended by the developers. It's about testing hypotheses through standardized research protocols. It is true that sometimes finding the right problem that needs solving is not always an easy task, and because every game and every experience is different, we do not always know what the right answer is. Iteration will forever be critical to design, even when using a human-centered design approach informed by human factors, principles, and cognitive psychology. Nonetheless, addressing UX feedback originating from UX tests, expert reviews, or data analyses should not be treated as just another opinion. If presented correctly, UX feedback is the least biased of all the feedback originating from various channels, while also being the most neutral. As long as UX practitioners know where they stand and have a clear understanding of the design and the business goals, this is very important, they should be the ones providing the most objective feedback. And that is it for that misconception. And again, that is very important that you need to be using data, not just opinion, and you want to try to not get emotional. I know you can become defensive when you're getting a lot of pushback from developers. It can be very difficult, but if you stay within your data and you get that backup research and that backup data to prove your case, then you're going to have much more effective way of communicating with them. And I would also, and this is one of the difficult things on project teams, is that everyone's super busy because you've always got all of these tight deadlines and everything. But ideally, the way that you want to work with your developers, and if you are a developer, this is the way you want to work with your UX people, is doing things together. And that doesn't mean that you as a developer, you have to run the UX methods and things, but understanding them, understanding the best practices, and doing things as a team. Like if you're a UX practitioner, bring a developer with you. Let them see for themselves if you can. If not, take a lot of video, a lot of recordings, and share that so that they can see, and include that in your reporting. Include that if they want to dig in more and learn more, or if there's a particular issue that you're having difficulty communicating, use the recordings to help push your argument, it's not really an argument, but your case forward. This is why. Always explain why. Because this issue is causing a problem for our target audience, our users. They're having difficulty because of this, and this is the proof that they're having difficulty because of this. And it's very difficult to try to keep the emotion out of it, but to make your case logically with your data backing it up will be much more effective, especially if they can see, if they can witness, if they can come along with you with your research and help you. That's going to be beneficial for everyone. And a lot of people have this argument that developers don't need to be doing UX research and so forth. And in the end, it'd be obviously the same argument for why are UX designers doing all the back-end code? They shouldn't, because you have your different expertises. But that doesn't mean you can't work together and you can't learn from each other. The more you understand about the development side of things as a UX practitioner, the more you can the better you can communicate with them. That doesn't mean you have to go learn code. If you want to learn code, go ahead. But that doesn't mean you have to be an expert back-end developer. Same thing, both ways. They can still learn UX best practices as a developer, or if you're a developer, you can still learn UX best practices. You can still understand some of the methods and how they're done things. That doesn't mean you have to do them, but understanding those things and why they work and how they work will make you a much more cohesive team, that collaborative team that can work together and come up with better solutions. So it's not, UX is not another opinion if it's done properly and appropriately. Now, UX practitioners can give opinions. That does happen. But when it's done well, they're backing things up with data and science and neuroscience and so forth and research to make their professional advice known. So let's go through the pillars of gaming UX, which are also from this book. There are 7 pillars of usability, and these pillars are if you're from a UX background or a human-centered design background, you probably recognize them from Nielsen Norman's heuristics. They are just worded slightly differently, and it's not all 10 heuristics that you get from traditional 2D applications, because again, this is a little different because we're doing entertainment, not applications for tasks. So she has changed a little bit specifically for gaming. And so there are 7 pillars of gaming usability and 3 pillars of engageability. And this engageability is what we're talking about that's a little different from your normal UX heuristics from traditional 2D applications and so forth. That we're, as UX designers, used to designing for, like your smartphone apps and so forth. This is entertainment. So how do we keep them engaged to keep them playing? And so the 7 pillars, she has reworded them slightly to make them a little more friendly for your normal audience. We like in the UX community to use lots of big words like heuristics. a lot of people don't know what those words even mean, so let's try to use normal words, everyday language, so that people are very clear on what we mean by what we're saying. And that is the whole part of the UX process, is to make sure as a UX practitioner, it's not one size fits all. And so we need to remember that for UX as well. That's why there are tons of methods out there for your profession, for our profession, all of these different methods. There are, and I don't want to go off on a tangent on that, but it's not one size fits all. Even for working on a team with other people, you want to study how your team works, how they work together, what words do they use, what's going to make sense to them, and then modify your own work style to work within that team so that you can be a more effective team. That's where I was trying to go with that. So, gaming usability. There are 7 pillars, and they are signs and feedback, clarity, form follows function, consistency, minimum workload, error prevention and recovery, and flexibility. And so I'll quickly go through those. So signs and feedback are all those visual, audio, haptic cues and so forth that inform you about what's going on in the game. And there are also signs that can encourage you what to do. Specific action, inviting signs, and so forth. And we will see very different forms of those. And this game in particular, we're going to see very different form of that than what you're used to, because this is more of a puzzle game that we have to figure out, we have to discover. So that is where, again, that whole concept of one size fits all doesn't work, because you want to, again, within the mechanics of the game, if it's going to hinder the game, you need to understand that and work through that. And then that's where all the great challenges come in of creating a better experience. So informative signs, a lot of times those are glowing objects within games. You see that a lot, but in this game you're going to see it's different. The inviting signs are going to be a lot more subtle than they are in a traditional, like just normal action game, for example. And feedback is where it's giving a clear reaction to what you've done to let you know whether or not you have successfully done it or not, or it's not ready yet, you can't do it yet. What are those signs? What's that feedback that helps guide the players through that experience? And clarity is all that signs and feedback, and that all of those things need to be clear and understandable. The typography, the color contrast that I was talking about earlier, your colorblindness, accessibility, your font usage, your UI design, all of these things need to be clear, and they should be perceptible but not intrusive. And that means that you should be able to quickly prioritize your information within the game and know what is currently relevant versus not relevant. And there are a lot of games out there that throw a whole lot of stuff on the game UI that is just in the way, and it's not relevant at a particular time, but it's always there. And that's information overload, which we'll get to as well. But clarity means what's relevant right now, what's not relevant right now. Get rid of the stuff or minimize the stuff that's not relevant so that they can focus on what they need to do right now. And form follows function is all of the characters, designs, the icons, the items, and so forth. They should accurately convey their function. And you want to design for affordances, and that's like a chair affords sitting, so you know if there's a chair there, can I sit in it, and so forth, and you know what's going to happen if you sit in it, unless there's some weird game mechanic that's different for a specific reason for that game, which is possible. It should intuitively inform how you can interact with it. Like a door, can you open the door or not? Doorknob affords turning. And then consistency is that all the signs, the feedback controls, the interface, the menu navigation, and so forth should be designed. The world rules, overall conventions of the game should be consistent. And that is not only in visual design, it's also in your mental models for certain types of games. For example, platform games have a certain mental model that we're looking through versus card games versus tabletop RPG games versus MMOs and so forth. They all have mental models associated with them and how you expect certain things to act and certain things to behave. For example, in MMOs, your enemies usually have some kind of icon portraying them as an enemy versus your allies versus the NPCs and so forth. There's consistency in that to let you know, unless again, it's a part of the game mechanic for you not to know who's your enemy and who's your friend, which could be also possible. So you want to follow that, and it's also including on regional controls. And I've talked about this as well, is that your regional controls matter as well if you're creating a global game. For my example that I like to give is for the Sony. In Japan, the circle is the select button and the X is the back button, whereas in America, the X is the select button and the circle is the back button. It's completely opposite. So when you're playing a game from Japan and they haven't modified their controls, then you're having to switch your brain to think, and that can cause a lot of accidents and a lot of difficulty when you're trying to play that game that shouldn't be there because the mental model should have been modified for American PlayStation gamers, for example. And I have that trouble a lot because I play a lot of games that are from Japan. And minimum workload. So that is the cognitive load and the physical load. The players should be able to focus on the game mechanics or the features or the content and less on the interface and the controls. They should be able to focus on what it is they're supposed to be doing within the game mechanics. The interface should not be what's distracting them unless it's part of the game, of course, unless it's part of the game mechanic. You don't want to get in the way of the game mechanic. Your interactions should not be cumbersome or overly complicated, and that is both mental and physically. How many clicks does it take to do this thing? How many buttons on your controller does it take to do this thing? Does it really need to take that many clicks? Or is that just why? Is it helping the game or is it hindering the game? And like if it's a part of the challenge, then sure. But if it's not part of the challenge, then don't work to make it easier. Work to make it easier so that it's not in the way of the game. And then error prevention and recovery is around you want to foresee what kinds of errors that players can make and then try to prevent them from happening. And then if they do happen, give them a way of recovering from that error. And for example, saving. If you leave a game without saving, what's going to happen? Is there an autosave, or is there going to be a pop-up saying, hey, you're about to leave the game and lose 2 hours of play? Do you want to save or do you want to go back to the game? So forth. Give them a way to recover and prevent them from making the error in the first place, if at all possible. And then flexibility is around how customizable is the game, within reason, of course, and that is your control mapping, your font size, your colors, your audio, your languages, your accessibility options, and we're going to look at those in a second inside the game. But the more customizable the game is, the more accessible it is for people. And that's also for difficulty levels. Some people like to play do or die. Other people like to just enjoy a chill game than a story. But they want to play your game, but they don't want it to be so stressful that they end up throwing their controller through their window or through their TV screen. You want there to be different levels of difficulty for people to enjoy the game. And within reason, of course. You have to think through that. What is it that I want for difficulty levels specifically, but accessibility options. Being able to add switches, accessible switches to, because some people have motor function impairments and they can't use your normal controllers or your normal keyboard and mouse. What can we do to help more people play this game? There are many motor function impairments out there besides what we traditionally go towards paralysis and so forth. There are many others out there. And even in that case, they should be able to play games too. Let's help them. Let's do that. Give the flexibility for them to be able to do that. Because there's a ton of people out there with motor function impairments, with auditory impairments, visual impairments. I know I've missed one. Cognitive impairments that want to play video games too. Let's help them do that. And then on the actual game side of things, we've got this entertainment game side of things. We've got this whole engageability aspect of it. What is going to help them stay engaged to continue playing this game? What's their motivation for playing this game? How does it make them feel? What's the flow of the game? So motivation is aiming to, players want to feel competent in what they're doing. So does this game allow them to feel some kind of competence, or is it so hard that they rage quit? You want to have autonomy, relatedness, focus on the meaning. What is their purpose in this game? What is the value and the impact of this game? What's motivating them to keep playing? And you want to offer meaningful rewards that are in context. So if it's a brand new player and they don't have access to crafting materials and being able to craft anything until level 10, then why would you give them crafting materials at level 1? Maybe right now at level 1 they don't have any gear and they're completely defenseless. Maybe give them gear, maybe give them healing potions for now, and wait to reward them with crafting materials when they can actually start crafting. Give them meaningful rewards based on where they are in the game. And then emotion is that polish of that game feel. What's the sense of presence? How do they feel? Like if you listen to this background music that's going on right now, it's very chill and very peaceful. And you see this sparkling water in the background. I know you can't see it very well right now, but you see a little bit of water in the corner there. It's very peaceful. So that's the feel that they've added to this game. And that is the character design, the camera controls, how you play it, what's that sense of presence, what's that reality that it's creating for you, and there should be discovery and surprise. And we'll find that this is very much about discovery in this game because it's a puzzle game and a platformer, which is what we're studying right now. And then the game flow implies accounting for the level of challenge, that difficulty curve, and that amount of pressure and pacing. And it requires distributed learning by doing. So there is this learning curve, and you'll see that in this game as well. As we progress, we learn more things that help us get through the rest of the game. And it slowly progresses in difficulty over time and in pacing over time. And that's a good game design. And so these are the pillars that we want to think about while we're playing any game that we play, regardless. And they work for any kind of entertainment game, including XR. So, and then afterwards we'll do a Rose Thorn Bud on it. So let's talk about the game that we're going to play today. That is Jivana. And I'm playing the Steam version. It is free to play. It is a short game. Right now, my guess is that they're going to be adding chapters because it's a very short game and the story's not over. It's a brand new game. It was just released in January of this year. And they're doing a good job. It's a French game. And we'll see that in a minute, that the voiceover is in French. But the environment design is beautiful, simple and beautiful. It's a story-driven adventure game. Alice is the main character, and you're playing her. She's a water priestess who uses her powers to open the path for her community, forced to flee after the appearance of a huge cataclysm. Explore the enchanting landscapes of Jivana, use your ability to manipulate water, and lead your people to safety. And discover the story of a community running away from its homeland destroyed by the sudden appearance of a devastating cataclysm. She has the power to shape water, and you're going to solve these different puzzles throughout, and you're going to. It's this description is very repetitive. Let's see. And the music is very chill and very nice as well. And it is French. You can choose either English or French. So let's get going on the game. Okay, so let's look at the options here because I was wanting to talk quickly about flexibility. You have options for your UI language, it's English or French, and your audio language. And there's an issue that I'm currently having that is not working because I had switched it to French to see what it was like in French. Because the English, again, I have an issue with the English actors usually not being very good. So I switched to French to see how that felt. But now that I've switched it to French and I can't switch, it's automatically switching to English in this UI. So this is potentially a bug. It's automatically switching back to English in the UI, but the audio is still in French. So I think it's a bug. And we talked a little bit about bug reporting a couple weeks ago when we were doing Nobody Saves the World. So if you want to check that out, you can go back and check that out. I do have timestamps in the video on YouTube that you can go back and check. And I talk about bug reporting in there if you want to check that out. But right now, I can't change it back to English because even though it's saying English here, it's still playing in French. And we'll see if that still happens because I'm talking about it now. It may have changed. But I think it's going to still be in French because I can't. Because I can apply changes here, but then it changes back to English. But then if I want to change it to English, this is dimmed out, so I can't apply changes. So I think it's stuck in French. And I think that the only way I can fix it is to uninstall the game and reinstall it. And so that's a potential bug. And then you can adjust your sensitivity and so forth. And you can invert your axes again. That is something different people think differently. And our cognitive function for motion is different in different people. I know that mine was inverted for a very long time until I was forced to play a game that I really liked that there was potentially a bug because it wouldn't work even though I was trying to invert the axes. It still didn't work, and it still forced me to play backwards to what I was used to. So then I finally got used to it. But the only reason that I did that was because it was a chill game that didn't require a lot of motion. So it wasn't detrimental when I moved the wrong way, the camera the wrong way. Whereas there was another game that I tried, Walking Dead, I think it was, on the PlayStation, where I could not invert the axis. It may have been the same problem. I couldn't invert it, but if my motion was not accurate, I kept moving the wrong way. I kept moving the camera the wrong way where I needed to select an option to do something to stay alive. And I kept dying because I was moving the wrong way. And I rage quit because I couldn't do it. And it was just making me mad. So I stopped playing. I still have the game and I haven't played it. I can try now because I used there was a chill game that I used that changed the way my brain's working, but that's not something that you want to give them that option, and you want to make sure that it actually works. And I haven't inverted it because I don't need to anymore. Colorblindness they do have accessibility options here, which makes me happy. They let you choose your colorblindness severity, and they let you choose whether or not you have these rumbles, because that may be an issue for some people, or not an issue, or some people may need it more because of various issues. So the fact that they give you options for the different types of colorblindness is very good. Now, whether or not they work for people with colorblindness, I'm not sure. I'm afraid to change it because, like with the English issue up here, I'm afraid that I'm not going to be able to change it back. So I haven't tried it. And again, I don't have those colorblindness issues, so I don't know if it's going to help or not. It would need to be tested with people with colorblindness issues to know whether or not these accessibility options are working for them. And you can, this is additional color blindness changes that you can make for helping with those visibility options, changing your red, blue, green, because these are the main colors that people have issues with in color blindness, most common ones. So being able to adjust that with these is very nice that they've added that, and that you can change your text size. You can change your contrast of your subtitles, which is excellent. A lot of people don't even give you that option. And you can see an example of the subtitles over here that it's right now. I've got the transparency. I don't know. I wish it would preview it. That would be nice if it previewed it. But it does preview your text. Oh, I see. That's nice as well. I'm not going to change. So you can make your text bigger if you have vision impairments and so forth, which is really nice. I like that they've done that. That's the type of flexibility we're talking about. And then again, on audio, you want to be able to adjust your sound effects and so forth, because people with hearing impairments have issues. Apparently I'm very sensitive to noise, so I have this game turned down incredibly low. Because it's very loud to me. Even now, it's at the volume when you actually get into the game is kind of loud to me. So I've got it turned down really low. And sometimes I have issues hearing because of my sensitivity. It's not so much a hearing impairment as it is a sensitivity, that if there's too much going on here, I have a hard time differentiating. And maybe that is an impairment. I haven't actually had it tested. But that's going to be a problem for people with hearing impairments. They have trouble at differentiating sound. So being able to adjust the levels of these different things is going to help them comprehend what they need to comprehend within your game at the level they can handle it, which is a very nice thing. That's what we're talking about with flexibility. And being able to adjust your special effects and so forth is another thing, but this is also within the limitations of, hey, I have a really crap. My computer's good because it can handle VR, but a lot of people, your common people, are going to have various levels of computing power, so let them be able to adjust their game so that their computer can handle it without blowing out their brain dead, their video card, because that can happen. And you can, of course, change your keys if you want, for different key bindings if you need to for various accessibility reasons. So I don't want to apply the changes. And I'm not sure if quit means quit the game or quit this menu. Okay, it quit the menu. So you want to have clarity in your menu options. Because here it means quit the game, I think. So you would want to change your wording to say back or return to main screen, or something more clear than just quit, because quit could mean many things to many people. And they also give you the options of choosing a chapter, which is another thing that I talk about for VR specifically, is letting them be able to pick up where they left off. And here you can also choose which chapter you want to, if you want to replay a chapter or something. They do, I think in this game you have to restart at a certain level, so this is how they handle saving the game. If at all possible, I would say save it and let them start where they left off instead of making them replay an entire level. That would be preferred to making them restart a whole new level all over again. Because people need to quit for many reasons, and you want to give them the ability to do so. In this game, and they're currently, because it is a brand new game, I'm thinking, and they don't offer the save game option, you have to choose your level. So otherwise I would be not playing a new game, I would be resuming the game that I was already playing. But whenever I close the game and open it back up, I have to start a whole new game or pick a level to start it. Not the ideal way of doing it. The ideal way would be to save and pick back up right where you left off, so you don't have to replay a bunch of stuff. But this is a short game, so it's not as huge of a deal. But if I'll be quiet. No.
Autrefois vivait une communauté dont la dévotion envers la déesse Jivana était sans faille. À l'aube du printemps, le rituel destiné à choisir une nouvelle prêtresse débuta. Devant l'autel, les villageois portèrent leur choix sur Aélis, une adolescente dont la gentillesse n'avait d'égal que sa détermination. Elle se vit confier le pouvoir divin de contrôler l'eau, source de toute vie. Un jour, les nuages noirs s'amassèrent dans le ciel jusqu'à former un colossal vortex. De son centre, un éblouissant rayon lumineux jaillit, dans un fracas assourdissant qui fit trembler la terre et les esprits. Sur son passage, il répandit la désolation et la peur. De crainte d'être à son tour emportée par le cataclysme, la communauté se vit contrainte à l'exil. Alma, l'aînée du village, évoqua l'existence d'une cathédrale qui aurait jadis préservé l'ancienne civilisation des pires calamités. Ils se mirent donc en route vers ce mythique édifice dont la promesse faisait s'éveiller en chacun la flamme de l'espoir.
Bon, le campement ne doit plus être loin.
I'm going to be playing with the controller, the Sony controller. It's the only one I have. One thing I wanted to say about the cutscene at the beginning was that I prefer it when they allow you to manually progress those, because there could have been something happening in the real world that made me get distracted and miss a lot of valuable dialogue. And you especially want to think about that for people with, well, distraction's one thing, but cognitive impairments and people with a second language. The language isn't their main language. And that's especially the case here because the game's stuck in French and I can't change it back to English, so I have to focus on one or the other. And if I can't read fast enough to keep up with the subtitles, then I'm going to miss a lot of important story. So you want to be able to give people the option. First of all, fix the bug where they can change it to whatever language they want. But second option is also give them the option to manually progress the dialogue and the story, so that, especially in VR, so that they don't miss stuff. Because in VR you get distracted by the world outside of the headset. In gaming you get distracted by the world outside of the game. It's life. It happens. And again, the language issue, if they can't read fast enough to keep up, then that's going to be an issue. But then some people can read a lot faster, or some people aren't having that issue. So you want to give that flexible option, manually progress versus auto progress. Let them choose. And I would say to automatically put it on manually progress with an option to switch that off so that it'll auto progress. And the subtitles, if you go back and check the video, again, we're talking about body copy. We talked about it last time as well, is that the body copy is too wide for quick scanning. So another thing that you can do to change that and to help the scanning, the reading happen more effectively is to make your body copy, keep your body copy at a max of, I think that it is 800 pixels, at least on a website, is the max for your width of your body copy for easy scannability. Between 600 and 800 pixels is, I think it's pixels, is easy scannability. I'm saying that off the top of my head, but I think that's correct. For easy scannability of text. Okay, I'm using the controller, and it is not inverted, so the sticks are moving the way apparently most people think. And yeah, that's our main character, Aelis. And you can see the signs here that we have are the environmental design is giving us the path for what we do with this game. They're using full environmental design and very little UI to teach you what to do here. So we're just following paths, clear paths that we can see that we can use. And right now, my mental model is telling me that the X, because I'm in America, that the X on the controller is what I'm going to use to jump, because this controller is not, I don't know why, I think because it's Windows, most games are made for the Xbox controller because they're assuming that most people with PCs have an Xbox controller, but I have a PlayStation controller. So I have to translate the signs, and you'll see that in a minute when we get to something that needs an interaction. But I'm following the path. This is their wayfinding.
Il a fumé. Évrard a dû commencer à préparer le repas.
Is just follow the path. Okay. And I had a hard time with this at first, figuring out how to do this. I didn't understand it. So it took me a lot of trial and error. At first I was, slide the right stick mouse towards you. I don't know why this didn't make sense at first, but I had a hard time figuring it out. Target a bud and maintain the right trigger or left click on the mouse. So they're giving you the instructions for both the mouse and so, because I'm trying my mouse right now and the world is moving a lot faster, which I can't deal with. That makes me motion sick, even on a 2D screen. So that's another reason I use a controller instead of a mouse, is for motion sickness. And if I right click on the mouse, it's left click on the mouse is what I'm doing. So, and then if I move the mouse towards me, that worked. Okay. I don't know why I had issues with this at first, but it took me a long time to figure it out. So that would be something worth studying in a playtest or your various methods of researching games, which we can talk about. Celia Hoden talks about it in hers, and we can talk about it too at some point. And it's starting you out with a very closed-in path to make it very clear this is how we're going. And then you'll see as the game progresses, the paths are going to become more and more complex. And talking about motion sickness, I have this issue, especially with these more modern platformer games, because the camera is attached to the character. You can see all that motion, that extra motion going on when I zooming in and out, panning, the whole world moving with the character.
Ah, Enfin.
I even get sick on a 2D screen, which is really sad. Imagine what it's like in VR.
Alors, Aélis, t'as trouvé quelque chose d'intéressant?
And this is what I was saying about let them manually progress. It's excellent that they give you that option. And then up in the top right corner, you see a message saying no auto pass. I don't know exactly what that means because that's not clear. Again, I think that they're translating it into English, but I don't know what auto pass means. So it's probably like a lost in translation thing. Is that auto pass auto progression or not? And the Y, again, that is for the Xbox controller, not the Sony. I'm guessing I would do trial and error to figure out what the Y is. I think it's the triangle. The triangle is the top button. Okay, auto pass activated. I don't know what that means, so let's see. I don't know what that means because it's not doing anything.
Quelques buissons à baies seulement. Les animaux se sont déjà enfuis depuis longtemps.
It didn't really do anything, so I don't know if that's a bug or what. But they're giving you the option to auto. I think they're giving you the option to auto progress or not, which is nice. It just needs you just need to make sure it works as intended. A few berry bushes only. All the animals seem to have left a long time ago.
Et toi, Évrard, où en es-tu des préparatifs? Tu as bien mis les caisses de vivres à l'arrière des chariots?
And you, Evrard, how are the preparations going? Did you put the food crates at the back of the carts?
Tout est prêt. J'attellerai les bêtes avec les gars demain à l'aube.
I'll land the animals with the guys tomorrow at dawn. Land the animals. I don't know what that means.
Concernant la route à prendre, vous avez fait votre choix?
Concerning the road to take, have you made your choice?
Nous passerons par les gorges au sud. Il me semble que c'est le chemin le plus court.
We'll pass by the gorges in the south. We'll have to check the irons of the mounts before that.
Quoi? Je vous l'ai déjà dit, Alma. Y a que de la rocaille au sud. Nos roulottes feront pas long feu là-bas.
I'm going to do something to let you pay attention to, because branching dialogue and dialogue is something that you're going to come across in VR as well, in XR as well, especially with games. So there's one time that everything that you're doing in a game, at least right now, has to be designed into it or designed back into it. So paying very close attention to all of the micro interactions and how they behave is an important thing. Think about when you're designing. So I'm going to do something weird here, as hopefully the dialogue lasts long enough to do it. But sorry if it's going to make you miss the story. But they're making a treacherous journey and they're trying to decide what to do. So what I've already told you, Alma, there's nothing but rocks to the south. Our trailers won't last long there. So I'm going to press the X button.
J'ai toute confiance en vos capacités, à tes hommes et à toi. Nous prendrons cette route. La décision ne te revient pas.
So if you pay close attention to what I did and the speed at which the letters moved, when you're just normally hitting the X to progress, in this case the X to progress, the text, this text will flow slowly as over time, as you're reading. But if I hit the X again, it all shows at the same time. And that's a good behavior to have in your text progression, is to have that option to slowly reveal to help people read at a certain pace, or to speed it up for the people that read faster, or for the people who've already played this part and they don't want to have to read it all again. They don't want to have to take the time to read it all again because they have already played this part and they're having to go through it again. And then I'm going to, if there's enough dialogue here, I'll try it again, but I'll hit the X 3 times to show you what happens with the audio on the third click.
Nos vies sont...
Évrard,
See,
reste calme, je t'en prie.
Not only did it make the text move quicker when I hit the X the second time, but then it stopped the audio of the voiceover and progressed to the next set of dialogue immediately. So that is a micro interaction, a micro behavior that is a good behavior to have in your game. When you don't have it there, it can become very frustrating for people who are trying to speed through a dialogue because they've already read it or they've already played this and they're just trying to get through it. And then that comes in where you have that flexibility of letting them do it this way because maybe they still want to see it and remember, but they don't have to read the whole thing. There are many, many, many reasons why. But this micro interaction is something that's very good to have in your game. And then also given the option to skip it altogether if they've already read it and if they've already been through it once. And that comes in with some logic too. And then letting them auto progress versus manually progress. Because if you manually progress, you could get through it faster than auto progress if you know that little interaction.
Je vous le répète, nos chariots sont trop fragiles et les bêtes sont épuisées. Ce chemin va nous faire perdre trop de temps et le fléau ne nous laissera pas de répit.
I'm telling you again, our carts are too fragile and the cattle are exhausted. This path will slow us and the scourge is still after us.
Ce chemin faisait autrefois partie du saint pèlerinage de la cathédrale. La déesse nous protégera si nous l'empruntons. Sois rassuré.
This path was once part of the holy pilgrimage of the cathedral. The goddess will protect us if we take it. Be reassured.
Je vois.
I see.
J'espère que la déesse connaît les routes aussi bien que moi.
I hope the goddess knows the roads as well as I do.
Je vais vous laisser. J'ai du travail.
I will leave you now. I have work to do.
Grand-mère, j'ai une question. Évrard et toi, vous vous disputez souvent, non?
Everard and you often argue, right?
La tempête nous suit encore et toujours. Cela dure depuis des mois maintenant et...
The storm follows us again and again and has been going on for months now. The storm's following them. Interesting. But one visual thing that you see here is that the person that's talking is attached to the dialogue box with a certain expression, and that helps you to know the tone of what's going on, which is nice. It's a nice extra level of detail that helps you understand the gravity or the emotion of the situation, along with the music that you hear right now, because the music has changed to something more foreboding, and the lighting is more foreboding.
Évrard et moi ne sommes pas toujours d'accord, il est vrai. Lui, il s'emporte, comme la tempête.
Mais pourquoi ne pas prendre en considération ses conseils? Pourquoi es-tu si certaine que cette route est la bonne?
Je comprends tes craintes, mais le pire qui pourrait nous arriver serait que le fléau s'insinue aussi dans nos cœurs.
So apparently something can happen if the scourge is not just a physical thing, but also an emotional thing, potentially.
Mon devoir est de rester lucide dans les moments difficiles. Évrard le sait, j'en suis certaine. Ah, Elise, tu dois me croire. Cette route est la plus sûre.
Je vois. C'est juste que plus le temps passe et plus le voyage est difficile.
Je sais, mais le plus dur est derrière nous maintenant. De jour en jour, maintenant tu devrais aller te reposer.
Je vais rester ici quelques minutes encore. Je vous rejoindrai plus tard. déjà plus de 6 mois que nous sommes partis. Je ne vois plus le temps passer.
Les journées se ressemblent, pour sûr. Les enfants s'impatientent. C'est
So
une épreuve qu'ils devront surmonter.
they've turned off manual progression.
Je vais me préparer. Evrard va avoir
So I'm
besoin
not
de moi.
manually progressing this right now. So there's an inconsistency in there in that behavior, and I would prefer that they keep it consistent. It would be better to keep it consistent for people's expectations on what's going to happen, so that if they stop paying attention because they think they have manual control over it anyway, they may miss something very important. So you want to keep that behavior
Le
consistent.
ruissellement de l'eau doit servir à activer ce mécanisme et ouvrir la porte.
Especially in VR. You want to always have this option to manually progress in VR especially.
Je vais voir ce que je peux faire. Attendez-moi ici.
And I talk about that in one of my articles. I can't remember which one right now. I know for sure it's in training for XR, because it's very important in training that they don't miss things. So I think I talk about it in that one, and I have to check to see which other ones I talk about it on, if any. But you want things happen outside of the headset. Oh yes, external distractions. There's an article and there are 2 videos on external. There's a video on external distractions as well. Things, especially in VR, that can happen that can keep you from paying attention to what's going on in the story, and you can miss a bunch of important information. And I also mentioned it in Demio, in the video, the game playthrough on Demio. And if you notice, at least for me, this music is incredibly loud now. I don't know how it is for you watching, but it's incredibly loud for me right now, so I'm gonna have to turn it down a little. And I've already got it turned way down. So let's see. And they're using environmental design to control where I go. I can't go this way because they've got these things blocking me off. So this is how they're doing the wayfinding. I can't go this way because this is blocking me off. So the only way I can go through this environmental design and lighting, because it is lit up more than these paths as well. These paths are dark, this path is light. I don't know if that's a consistent behavior, but we'll see. It's the only way I can go is this way. And again, since we know this is a platformer, we go up. And I'm hitting the X button to jump. And the right trigger and pull the right joystick towards me. And again, I am sensitive to motion. So the way the camera keeps moving on its own. So I'm moving it right now. But as she moves, I'm not moving the camera. That is where you see the paths lit, kind of, and it's going up. But, oh, here's a divergence.
Un hôtel, ici.
We have our first altar. And so they say press E or Y to interact, because again, they're showing the keyboard and the controller buttons at the same time. I would say try to keep it to where you know what they're using. You detect that they're using a controller, then show the controller. Or if they've set it to the controller option in the settings, show the controller controls. You don't have to show both. Because someone who's brand new to gaming and is not very technically savvy, quote unquote, isn't going to understand that that's the keyboard and the mouse. And also, I've noticed that in these instructions, they're inconsistent in the order. So you'd want to keep them in the order. And also potentially include a symbol to help them know. Because the E is on the keyboard, the Y is on the controller here, but in a previous tooltip, this is called a tooltip, the controller interaction was shown before the keyboard interaction. So there's an inconsistency in order, and that's not in and of itself a huge deal, except that people create mental models as they do things. And if someone is going to have a difficult time understanding or differentiating between the E and the Y, because again, I don't have a Xbox controller, I have a Sony controller, there are no letters. So for all I know, there is an E on the Xbox controller. How do I know? I don't have one. So it would be better to have a clear distinction. This is the E on the keyboard, this is the Y on the controller. But even better, design for the Sony controller as well, and let us choose that as well. That would be even better. So Y, again, I'm guessing it's the triangle. It is. So I have 1 of 5 altars active. One thing I don't like is that that task goes away. And yeah, I think they're doing it for the sake of, like, look at these beautiful environmental visuals. Isn't it pretty? But I would like to keep track of, because I may forget how many altars, or I may not have paid attention. How many altars do I still need to find? I have 5 to find. So let me keep track of that, so I know what I'm supposed to be doing. And that's not far enough to do anything. So this is why it's a puzzle game. You have to figure out how to get up there, because that's where we want to go next. And I'm standing further back from the computer because, again, that motion makes me, all that motion makes me uncomfortable. So the more things that aren't moving in my periphery, the better, to help reduce that risk of motion sickness. If I was standing way up here and all of that motion was happening, there's less stable environment in my periphery, so more movement is in my visual range. And that's something to pay attention to in VR, and that's why we have all these rules around motion sickness, best practices around motion sickness in VR especially, is to reduce that risk of motion sickness for people that are sensitive to it. Because it seems that a lot of the time the people on the development team don't have any issues with motion sickness, so they ignore it. But then that makes the game unusable. I have to only play this game in short stints, and it's already a short game, but I even have to play shorter amounts of time in it because of that, because of the motion that's happening in the game, because the camera is attached to the player. And there are other games that do this differently, and we're going to play one next week that does it differently. The camera's not attached to the player, and this is specifically for 2D, attaching the camera to the player, because it's going to have to be, maybe, in VR, not always, and we're going to play a game that thinks outside the box on that one as well in the future. I think it's 2 or 3 weeks from now. That one's in VR. And again, you'll see the environmental design here. There's a very clear path to follow, and going anywhere else, you can't go anywhere else. There's a clear path that they've laid out with the environmental design, that this is where they want you to go.
Qu'avons-nous fait pour mériter ça? Je ne comprends pas. Je ne dois pas traîner ici.
Again, this part is just, they're not giving you hints because this is one of the game mechanics, so they want you to figure this part out, which is fine. Oh, there's another altar right here. Ugh, and I can't jump there. Okay. And the more I mess up, the more movement I'm exposed to, the more risk of sickness. Again, I'm just following the paths. Is there a path I can follow? Is there somewhere I can go without falling? So that's a good environmental design. And this is just trial and error to see, what does this thing do? It shoots you across. So this is the difference in what's a game mechanic, that you want them to figure this thing out. That's still too far for me to jump. That's an interesting thing they did there. You couldn't see this one, so because you could have just used that to get across over there potentially, but instead they had this be the most noticeable thing in the design to teach you that this thing is here to shoot you across things, because you may not have noticed it before. And now I've got that branch that I found earlier sticking out that shot me right to it. Continue following the path. And now it's not fully clear. So what is the option when it's not fully clear? Trial and error. She can skate on water. Hold A or space to charge your jump, then release. And this motion is not friendly for me. That's like too much speed of motion. This motion's a bit much. Let's see. Now we're just looking for stuff. I think it also has something to do with the speed of motion. And the fact that I'm not fully controlling where the camera goes, because it's moving it for me. That's the one I just did. Ugh. I'm groaning because it's moving the camera for me, and I don't like it.
La voilà. C'est pas
You
tout.
definitely don't want that in VR. You want them to control all of their movement, their camera movement in VR. Throw the water on the glowing part of the sluice to open it.
On se remet en route. Alice nous rejoindra au plus vite.
Okay. Water goes down. I went up. Moving back again because this is too much motion. So you see that it's not only, it's slowly teaching me more and more like mechanics as I go. Like this water jump, and you'll see that it becomes more and more complicated and complex as the game progresses. So that's the pacing. We're thinking about the pacing and the flow and the level, the curve of difficulty.
Nous devrions faire une pause et vérifier le matériel.
Pas
It's-
maintenant, Alice.
And again, it's
Il faut qu'on
auto-progressing.
traverse
I'm
le
not
pont du Trait.
I'm
On
not
peut pas
manually
rester là.
progressing.
D'accord. Je m'occupe de l'arrière du convoi. Compte sur moi.
Merci, ma petite. On va devoir continuer jusqu'à la tombée de la nuit. Il faut garder ce rythme.
Les bêtes ont l'air épuisées, mais elles devraient tenir encore quelques heures.
Bien. Accrochez-vous encore un peu. Nous établirons le campement au plus vite.
But this is something important. So I was talking, first of all, I was talking about the difficulty curve is increasing slowly as the game progresses. Please let me manually progress this.
Eh, t'es bien débrouillé là-bas. T'es pas une mince
Thank
affaire.
you. And the second point that is right here is in a classroom setting, especially if you're designing things that are training, VR training, or something for the classroom, you absolutely want to allow them to manually progress. Because as we see in this situation, if it's a classroom setting or a training setting, there's going to be things going on outside of the headset or outside of the game. Like me talking, for example, I'm the instructor talking to the student. And so as I'm talking to the student can't pay attention to what's going on in the game, and the instructor is having trouble focusing because there's stuff going on in the game. So you want to, especially for training, make sure that they have control over the progression of the game, because that gives time for that external, again, that external distraction of the instructor talking to the student to make a point about something. And so in training in XR, that is very important. So this whole feature of manually progressing the story, letting them go at their own pace so that they can learn at their own pace, and that's in training in XR. And I will try to remember to include these things in the show notes as well. But if you check out my website, let me put the link in here. It's in the About section on the Twitch. If you scroll down to the About, you'll see my website, the link to my website. Let me put it in Twitch chat as well. Hopefully that is the right command. Yes, it is. You can check out Training in XR and External Distractions. I have an article on, I don't have a video on Training in XR yet, but I do have an article on it, and I have an article on, I don't remember if I have a video. I don't have any videos on training yet. I may have some patterns, I don't remember. But I do have an article and a video on external distractions. And so check those out on the website, and I will include them in the show notes for those that are going to be watching this later on demand on YouTube. So be sure to check those out to learn more. So hey, you did good out there. It was a big deal.
Merci, mais ce n'est pas encore fini. Je me lèverai tôt demain matin pour préparer notre départ. Évrard?
Pose-moi ta question. Je vais pas te manger.
Pourquoi ma grand-mère et toi vous vous disputez si souvent? Tu ne lui fais pas confiance?
Bien sûr que je lui fais confiance. Mais ces gens, ils sont tout ce que j'ai.
Yeah, and again, pay attention to the design of the characters in this picture that's on the dialogue by the name. The picture, you'll see these expressions that they have, and their body language is helping express the tone of this. Now, you would do this differently in VR than you would in a 2D game, because in VR you've got the NPC behaviors that they're going to be looking at, because the expectations are different in VR for NPC behaviors than they are in video games, and you want to pay close attention to your NPC behaviors in VR. And I don't know if I've talked about that as much yet. Let me make a list of things that I need to include in the show notes later. So I need to include stuff about NPC behaviors. Motion sickness, training, and distractions, external distractions. And if you're watching this, whether you're watching this live or you're watching this later on YouTube, again, the whole idea here is to help you to also gain practical experience. So to do that, feel free to participate. It's not just a one-sided thing. I want the people that are watching this to also participate so that you can get something out of it, so that you can gain a practical experience and learn from it as well. So your comments on YouTube, I do check those, and I check the comments that are happening on Twitch during the stream too. Go ahead and feel free to participate. That's how we're going to learn and improve together, is through that participation and discussion. So ask your questions, and I'll give you resources or do my best to answer them.
J'étais juste pas d'accord parce que je craignais qu'il leur arrive quelque chose. Et maintenant que nous sommes ici, faut aller jusqu'au bout.
I do have a video on NPC behaviors, so I've got it written down. I will share that. If you're checking out my website, you can do a search for NPC behaviors, and it should come up, hopefully. Hopefully I tagged it well. If I didn't, let me know.
Alma se fie à la déesse, et moi je me fie à Alma. Et à toi.
Je vois. C'est vrai que cette route n'est pas de tout repos. Mais les autres peuvent compter sur nous pour les aider.
Comptez sur toi, surtout. J'étais là tout à l'heure. Depuis quand la petite Aélis est devenue si forte?
J'ai simplement utilisé le don qu'on m'a offert. Je me suis beaucoup entraînée pour être à la hauteur.
Quoi qu'il en soit, nous n'en serions pas là sans toi. Je t'aime bien, petite.
Merci, Emma.
And here I also talk about load times. You hear that there's water running, but there's nothing showing.
Tout le monde, on va devoir s'arrêter à nouveau.
The water flowing, and again, it's auto-progressing. I'm not manually progressing, which is frustrating. Because again, I'm trying to talk, but also external things happen, like I was just writing, so I completely missed what was going on with the
Je vais trouver un
dialogue.
moyen de les ouvrir en vitesse. Il ne faut pas traîner ici.
Load times. I was talking about, you heard water flowing, but the screen was blank, so that is something that is important in game design, to have a load screen or something to let you some indication of knowing that the game didn't break, that it's still working. And even though I could hear the sound, I still wondered, is something going on here? Why is it taking so long to load? The indication of loading somehow on a normal game is very important, because that lets you know that no, your computer didn't break, it didn't freeze, it's still loading. Having some kind of loading indicator will help with that, but it's especially important in VR because, again, your entire world is being taken over. Your senses are being taken over by this VR headset. So having the whole world go black and there not being any sound or anything makes you think it broke. And it's very uncomfortable. So you want to have some kind of loading indicator when they're in VR. And I talk about this in, it's another one on my website. I think it's called Load Times. I don't remember off the top of my head. But it talks about the load times in the best practices for doing that in VR. You want to make sure they know that it's still working, and there are ways that you can do that through audio cues, but you don't want it to just be audio. That's like a minimum, because again, not everyone has, there are multiple reasons that people could have their sound off, or they may not be able to hear it at all because of a hearing impairment. So you want to make sure there are multiple cues to let them know, hey, this thing is still working, it didn't break, we're all good, it's just loading. But then also optimizing your scenes to reduce that is going to especially be very important in XR experiences for multiple reasons, including latency, performance issues that can cause, that can result in jittering, that can cause motion sickness, another cause of motion sickness. So here we have a clear path here that we're trying to get through here, but I can't go that way. And so it's again giving me environmental design to tell me where can I go, where can I not go. So I can try going up this path, but it's getting darker and darker that way, and it looks like what I need to do, and I can't go past that thing. So what I need to do, again, is using that environmental design to tell me where I need to go. And she's a water priestess, so here's a bunch of water. That's another thing. What is it in the story and what is it in the environment that's telling me where I need to go? And I see something over here, so I'm just gonna go this way and interact. And now I know I need 3 altars, so I need to find 3 things in the environment. So Looks like I have to go that way. Right. Because that's where I just was. And I learned that I can jump on the water to get past that thing. So that's that increased difficulty curve that we're talking about. Where can I go? I have to use the water. And I have to move back because there's a lot of motion going on. Again, that's a motion sickness thing. Looks like I need to go up, jump on a waterfall to ride it. So this I had trouble with. I had trouble figuring this out because when I was learning to move on water, I learned to hold down the X button, or I don't remember which button it is, on the Xbox controller, or the space bar, to power up to jump. And so I thought that that's what I needed to do. And then I would jump too early and I would end up right back where I was. And it actually got to the point where that was too much motion, and I ended up rage quitting for the day because I was starting to get sick because of all that falling and motion was making me uncomfortable. But then the thing I had to learn, which it doesn't make clear here at all, is that I just have to jump like I would, and then I have to jump again. Oh, I made it across. Interesting. To get off the waterfall, you have to jump again. While riding, jump on camera change to reach the other waterfall. And so I had trouble with this one too, because this is not a very clear instruction. And so then the challenge is, how do you make that a clear instruction? So that I don't have anything on clear instructions. It's in training in XR, so that one's already on the list of things. That I'm going to make a note of, though. So when you're doing these analyses, you're not just going to rely completely on your memory. You want to take notes so that when you get into the rose thorn bud or whatever type of feedback that you're going to be giving at the end, or your analysis or whatever it is you're doing, you want to take notes while you're playing the game. And that's another reason that you want to be able to manually progress, but that is kind of a selfish reason for that. But it just, again, shows that there are many, 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 many reasons that people need to be able to go at their own pace. Especially in training, you need to stop and be able to think and not miss all the important information, because people process information at different speeds, and they need to be able to do that. And even in games like this, where you're just doing it for entertainment, different people process information at different speeds, so they need to be able to go at their own pace as much as possible. The instructions aren't always clear. I want to make sure that I note that for the rose thorn bud later. Accidentally moved my mouse. Okay, so this instruction is not clear, and it's another one that I had a hard time with, because I thought I had to do the camera change because I expect to be able to control the camera. But again, if you pay close attention to how the camera's behaving, I'm not moving the camera. I'm just jumping and riding. And then I have to jump because the camera is the game changed the camera, not me. And I can't get back to do that. There will be another waterfall in a minute, I think. But I have to wait for the game to change the camera because it does this kind of shift thing. And once that shift happens, then you jump. I thought I had to control the camera too, so I just kept falling. Here's one to show that. Camera shift, And now we're here. And it took me multiple tries to get that because I thought I had to shift the camera, which I would prefer. So it looks like I have 2 options for paths here. I will try this one. They like to hide these altars. And now that I know that, I go on the obscure paths too if there's one available. Again, that difficulty curve thing. And I don't know if I'm going to have to jump, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Power up.
Dépêche-toi, ma grande, le fléau nous talonne.
Compte sur moi, Eva.
Oh no. It's out of video memory, trying to allocate a rendering resource. Make sure your video card has the... I'm getting a pop-up error that on my PC that you can't see on the screen. So it's is it forcing me to exit out of this game? Oh no. That is annoying. I don't know what happened. I don't know why that happened. That is a new thing that hasn't happened before. So that is very annoying. So this is why we want to be able to let people pick up where they left off. I'm gonna try it. I don't know if I can't continue the game, we're just gonna have to do the rose thorn bud from here, but I'm gonna try it. But I'm gonna have to restart that whole section. What time is it? 1:53. We may just go ahead and stop there. But one thing, because of time. So we'll just stop there and do the rose thorn bud from here. Because I don't want to do the whole level again. And it's already 1:53. So we'll just stop there. And continue with rose thorn bud. Okay, let me change my settings here. I don't know why that happened. This never happened before, but I had that video card issue. There shouldn't have been anything running in the background to take up resources. So I don't know why that happened. That was the first time that ever happened. Annoying. Another reason you want to allow people to be able to pick up right where they left off. There could be a technology failure, and this is one of those things. Error prevention recovery. Not everything is an error made by the player. Some things are errors made by the technology. You want them to still be able to recover from that where possible, and one of the ways that they can recover from that is to let them pick up where they left off. I have to restart that entire level over again. Whereas if it was auto-saving at certain points, or letting me save, I wouldn't have been able to because of the error. But auto-saving at certain points would have let me pick back up after, for example, I had already found the altar to... I already found 2 altars. Now I have to go find them again. I don't want to. Honestly, I don't feel like it right now. So that keeps me from continuing the game. So let them pick up where they left off. So that they can keep playing the game and not get frustrated. Okay. Rose thorn bud. So this is, again, a quick and simple method for people to use in a critical thinking, critical analysis about an experience of any kind. It could be experience a game like we're talking about now. It could be how you work with your teammates on a project. How did a project go? How did working with this client go? And this helps you critically think about it. And then at the end of it, you have a set of next steps, a clearly defined set of next steps. And so the roses are you talking about what went well, what didn't go, what went well, what was a highlight, what did you like, So that, what are the good things? And so then, because we want to think about the good things, because we want to continue on that path and thinking about those things. And then the thorns are what didn't go well. You don't want to just focus on the thorns. You want to focus on the good things too, for multiple reasons. To learn, okay, we continue doing this in the future. We learn from this. This is a good thing to continue trying. And then the thorns are the things that we need to figure out how to fix. So you want to focus on both, not just the thorns. So what did thorns or what did not go well? What was a low point? What do we not like? And then ideally for each thorn, you have at least one bud. What are the opportunities that you see? What would you do differently next time? What questions do you have? So buds are not just about fixing the thorns. They're also about next steps. What do we need to explore? What do we need to research? What do we need to verify, validate? And this will help you identify if you're planning usability testing or something on an experience, it'll help you identify what to pay attention to. If you are working with a team and you're trying to improve your teamwork and your collaboration, you would know what do we need to improve? What do we need to explore? What do we need to validate for working together as a team? So this is very valuable exercise for anything, any kind of experience that you're wanting to evaluate and improve on. And the buds give you this very clear list of next steps. So one thing that people often do is mix up the thorns and the buds. And they'll put a thorn in a bud and then with the bud. But that muddies up the next steps. Or they'll put the bud in the thorn. And that'll get missed in the next steps. Because you want the buds to be a clearly defined list of next steps. What is it that I need to do next? So we'll go through that now with this game. So what was something that I liked? The music. And you'll pay attention. I like using Post-its because it keeps the points very short and concise. So we don't need a dissertation here. That can come later if needed. Right now, we're just doing points, short thoughts, and the Post-its help keep it short. That's why I like using Post-its. So music is successfully setting moods, tranquil versus unease and so forth, because we had that unease when we were seeing that calamity that was coming, or whatever they called it. And then it's definitely a very clean UI. No clutter. No clutter at all. Let's see, they teach the interactions contextually. I like that. And mechanics. When needed. When needed, first introduced. They're teaching it as you need it, instead of teaching you everything up front and expecting you to remember it all. They're teaching you as you need it, which is a good thing. And then, let's see, the environmental design. Is successfully guiding you. Is being used as wayfinding. As we saw. They're teaching the mechanic, and so I do have another thought about the mechanics thing, is that we were talking about earlier, is that the difficulty curve, I'm thinking about how to word this a short, concise way. This is why I'm going quiet. Because what I'm talking about is the how they slowly taught you things over time, and the difficulty increased over time. So, and it built on what you learned before. Difficulty curve increased over time, building on, I'll just say that, on what learned before. So they did that successfully for the most part. Environmental design is used as your wayfinding. They do have, they include controls for accessibility or options, like settings. Well, at least for colorblindness. I don't know about all the other accessibility issues. So if anyone's watching, what are some other roses? What can you think about? If you're watching this later on YouTube, you can add in the comments, what are some other roses? Because I'm going off of memory here, because I didn't write things as I was going. And that's another reason you want to take notes as you're going when you're analyzing something, is so you can, so that you don't forget, you don't miss. I just haven't been doing it because of time, and because this is a stream that, but I can start doing that if that will help, because that is a practice that you want. So I could lead by example in doing that, taking notes. But again, you want those notes to also be very short and concise, and then record, because I'm recording as I play, so that you can go through later to validate, and then, or you may have to go back in the game to validate, but that is going to take more time to get back to the point that you need to validate. That's why you want to also record things as you play them, so that you can refer back, or you can grab clips to share to show what you're talking about. Or in the case like we had last 2 weeks ago when I was playing Nobody Saves the World, I came across a bug, and so now I have video clips of that bug so that I can share that and prove, hey, I'm not crazy. This really did happen. Here's your proof, kind of thing. So that's another good reason to record. So what are some other... Sorry, my headphones are hurting my head. They're digging into my glasses, which is hurting my head. Which is giving me a headache. Other good things. What are some more good things? The interactions are simple. There's not a lot of complex interactions. So that's all I can think about right now. I'm sure there are a lot more. It's like story's good. It's short. I think there's more to it than what's here, because again, it only takes about maybe 20-30 minutes to play through this game, from start to finish. Maybe an hour if you're like still discovering, but depending on, you know, how quickly you pick up on it, of course. It can last anywhere from like 23 minutes to hour, 2 hours, depending on your how quickly you pick up on how to do things. So it's a short game, and the story feels like a cliffhanger. It doesn't feel like it's done. So I think they might be adding chapters later. I'm not sure. I need to check the website. But that is another way to release games, is to release by chapter or episode. Vader Immortal does that as well. And episodes is a way to get your game out quicker and learn and iterate. Thorns are what didn't go well, what was the low point, what did you not like. So one of the things that I wrote down was the instructions are not always clear. So it's kind of hard to figure them out sometimes. And let's see, I'm kind of OCD if you didn't notice, lining everything up. Of course, it's not lined up to the grid, but I ignore that. The instructions were not always clear. The inconsistency in manual versus auto progression. Auto progression. Let me clarify. Auto progression of dialogue. Made me miss important. So this needs to also be in. Again, I keep catching myself on this. I make things in present tense. But teaches interactions and mechanics especially when first need difficulty curve increases over time, building on what's learned before. Environmental design is used as wayfinding, includes settings. Okay, I like doing it in present tense because this is the current state of the game. It helps me think present tense. It's just a mental thing. Helps everyone think this is the current state. So instructions are not always clear. Auto regression makes, so this is current state, makes me miss important story information. Which, and in this case, it seems like sometimes the story matters to what you're doing to help you figure out the puzzles that you're trying to figure out. So you want that to be manually progressed because I missed some stuff. And the only reason I knew what to do was because this was not my first time through the game. So I knew that I needed to find these things to unlock. I can't remember if that part was auto-progressed or not. But there were other things in the story that could matter. Like, I think they mentioned at one point, going up and finding at the source to stop the water, to get the water flowing again. How do you do that? And there was some dialogue that was talking about it, about the history and so forth that I missed. That may have helped. But again, they did help with the environmental design did help still, in spite of that, help you find where you needed to go, which was a good way of error prevention, I guess. But it would be good to let them not miss the story. So some other things were, and that had to do around auto progression, NPC behaviors. So, well, that was a rose. The NPC character designs next to dialogue. Help convey tone and mood, as does the music and the lighting. So I'm going to just say music and lighting are successfully setting moods, tranquil versus unease. And NPC character designs next to the dialogue help convey the tone and the mood. Because again, not everyone will be able to hear what's going on. So what are some other things that we can do visually or so forth that can help them understand the tone and the mood? And this is, I talk about this in one of my videos. I can't remember which one. They're all starting to like blur together for me because I've made so many. But I talk in one about hearing, not being able to hear for many reasons. One could be that it is a, which video was that? I made a video and an article on it. And it could have something to do with the external distractions one. Don't remember. But there are many reasons that someone may not be able to hear. So you want to accompany things with visual and haptic and environmental cues. And the NPC behavior, the character design when it's next to the dialogue box is helping convey the mood and the tone. And the lighting helps convey the mood and the tone in case you can't hear, because there's many reasons you couldn't hear. For example, right now, my head is hurting because the headphones are digging into my glasses, which are then digging into my head and making my head hurt. So when I'm not streaming, I'm taking the headset off and then I can't hear the game unless I turn on my speakers, which I don't like doing because I'm not the only one here and I don't want to bother everyone else. So then there are many reasons that people are not going to have sound, not just accessibility reasons. But if you make a game designed for accessibility, then it's going to help a lot more people than just those with accessibility issues. And you can learn more on my YouTube channel. I have a link to the channel called Ally VR, which talks about accessibility, especially specifically for VR. Anyway, let's get back to Thorns. What were some other Thorns? Anyone watching, feel free to add some. Motion sickness, definitely a thing. Movement, camera movement. So, inability, because I'm going to say why. To fully control camera movement is causing motion sickness. So let's see. It's risking motion sickness for those that are like more sensitive to it. And this would be something to pay attention and study, including in a 2D game, because if they're going to have an issue in a 2D game, they're definitely going to have an issue in VR, for sure. So then that would be something to follow up on. That would be a BUD, because that would be what's a question. So follow up on that would be study this, test it, and what can we do to design it to make it different. So one of the things that I do in games is that being able to zoom out the camera so that I have a bigger view of the world is causing less motion than when it's zoomed in. So being able to zoom out more reduces that risk of sickness for me. Because there's another game that I play quite a lot that I keep zoomed out because of that. Yeah, it keeps me from being able to see my cool character, but it also keeps me from getting sick and quitting the game. So there's that. Another thing would be another thorn. The auto progression I already talked about. Load times. Well, let's see. So rows would be that they music or sound effects. I think it's usually water. Continue to play when next scene loading. However, a thorn is that there's no visual load time indicator when new scene is loading. makes me wonder if the computer is freezing, because audio can continue playing when it's frozen. So just having the audio again is not the full solution. You want multiple cues. NPC behaviors was a good thing. Training was kind of good thing, except for the instructions weren't always clear. I can't think of a ton of bad things about this game. It's a good game. Most part is good. There was a potential bug. Yeah, I forgot about that. There's a potential bug. And again, I talk about bug reporting in more detail in the Nobody Saves the World. And if you check the timestamps, you'll see you can go straight to it on YouTube, where I talk about bug reporting. A potential bug: can't change language back to English. In the settings, it's stuck on French. And that is audio, voiceover language. To clarify that it's not the UI language that I changed. I didn't try the UI language. I'm afraid to now, because of that. I can't change it back. That is it that I can think of for Thorns. If you think of more, again, post them in the chat or in the comments in YouTube if you're watching it later. Now let's talk about buds. And again, buds are what are opportunities? What would you do differently? What are some follow-up questions that you have? What's something to keep in mind? So instructions are not always clear. I accidentally hit a cable. I hate that there are so many cables still on everything. And I almost hurt my computer. Hopefully my mic's still working well, because that's the cord that I hit. So, opportunities. Instructions are not always clear. I would say because it seemed like the reason that the instructions were not always clear was partially because of a potential language barrier. But I'm not sure if it was because of that. I don't know why it was, but I would say work with let's see. I'm multiple thoughts are going on in my head. So you would want to. There are multiple things that you'd want to do. You would want to get preferably a UX writer. On the wording. And you would also. Why is this freezing now? Come on. Why is my technology being so much of a pain today? I don't know why my technology is being such a pain today. So you'd want to work with a UX writer on wording, and you would want to accompany instructions with visuals. But I do like how the tooltips were non-intrusive. That's a rose. but still noticeable, perceivable, and that was something that we mentioned in the clear signs. Clarity, still perceivable, but they're not intrusive. I can spell perceivable. And then you want to accompany instructions with visuals. How can you do that and still keep it non-intrusive? That would be a challenge. So that would be a question. So I would add that here. How can we add visuals while still keeping non-intrusive? Because we like that it's non-intrusive. So another reason you want to do the roses, to remember we don't want to change that. And then inconsistency in the manual versus the auto progression. Well, those are two different thorns. So let's see. That they may have the same bud. Allow option to manually progress dialogue. And that will solve everywhere there's dialogue. That's both. That solves both of those. And again, if you think of more buds, add in the comments or the chat as well, because this, I'm wanting you guys to get practical experience with this. The inability to fully control the camera movement risks motion sickness. And give player control of the camera and let them zoom out more to reduce movement. Consider, I'm going to say consider, because again, there is this issue with cameras, and we saw it a little bit in this game too, is like you've got physics, you've got colliders and so forth in your game, and when you move the camera, if it's hitting one of those colliders, there's going to be a sudden zoom in or out on something. When you move around those different colliders on your objects for your camera, you want those colliders there, because otherwise you're going to be seeing through models, and your camera's going to suddenly be stuck inside a model instead of the environment, and that's an issue you see in a lot of games. So the fact that they have the colliders there is good. So then if you're zooming out, that motion in and out is going to be a lot more drastic and could be a lot more annoying, and that could also risk sickness. So what is the solution? Seeing if there's a way to detach the character from the camera would be one. There are games that do it, and we're going to be playing one next week, but then that game also has certain limitations. There are ways to do it though. So then that's the challenge. And this would be a consider. So we don't want to prescribe. We want to explore the improvements. We don't want to always prescribe. If we know that it's a best practice, yeah, sure, because that's the best practice. But if we're not sure for various reasons, we don't want to prescribe that. We want to test it. We want to research it. So I would say explore options for detaching camera from player character. And then give player control of the camera. That is the best practice for most of the time. However, sometimes it's not. That's why we think about these in context of what we're doing, because it's not always the case. There are multiple times I've come across where, yeah, that applies 99.9% of the time, but then there's that 0.1% time where, no, that's not going to work here. So we need to be flexible. We need to be open to that. Because there are the times when that does happen. The more you know, the more you practice, the more you study, the better you'll get at understanding when that is the case. So no visual load time indicator when a new scene is loading. Makes me wonder if the computer is freezing. And this is a best practice to accompany. So use multiple methods of feedback, visual, audio, and so forth, to let them know the scene's loading. And then there's this potential bug that can't change the voiceover back to English, and I would just say, fix the bug. Follow up with a bug report would be the next step there. And you would want to, in that case, and we talked about it in Nobody Saves the World, the fact that I have it recorded helps. And you would want to include that clip in your bug report if possible. Especially if you're working on a team project, you can, and you would want to include that recording. And that's why we like to record when we're playing, is so that we have that record of things. And we can also, it also helps us to refer back to something without having to restart playing the game like we were doing here. There was some kind of graphical error, and I would have had to completely restart that level because they didn't have a save feature. So having video, we can just go scrub the video and see what happened instead of having to go back and play the game, which can take more time than scrubbing a video. That's a reason we record while we play anything that we're reviewing. So that is a good practice to have. So now how can we translate these learnings into XR? So we did talk a little bit about that already while we were playing the game. Motion sickness is a big deal. In VR and in XR. So you want to follow those best practices, and so if it makes people sick in 2D, will definitely make them sick in VR. So we want to remember that and keep that in mind when we're creating our VR and our XR, because it is, again, it's taking up more of your visual space, even if it's mixed reality. not as big of an issue on a phone because it's a small screen, and so it's much smaller interaction. You have much more of the world stable in your surroundings. But in VR and in mixed reality, it's much bigger risk. VR and MR, mixed reality headsets. It's a much bigger deal. So you want to follow those best practices for motion sickness, and those, again, I will share those in the show notes for the YouTube video, that you definitely want to follow those things and think about the motion sickness and the risks of motion sickness, what causes that, and my articles talk about that and the videos talk about that. So follow that. Follow those best practices and test. And then take it seriously, please. And then another thing that we were talking about was NPC behaviors, because NPC behaviors are it's much more important it's much more perceptible in mixed reality and in VR in particular than it is in a 2D game. Weird NPC behaviors in a 2D game is a lot more forgivable, because you're getting into that when you're in a VR experience, you're immersed in it, and the NPCs are the same size as you for the most part, most of the time. They're the same size as you. So their behaviors matter a lot more, because we have certain expectations for the NPCs to behave like they would behave in real life. Proper NPC behaviors. Are vital in VR. So you want to remember that and keep that in mind, because we are immersed. And for example, there was a experience that I was working on, and it was when we were still new to it, new to dealing with NPCs in games in VR, and you don't think about it as much, because if you're coming from a 2D background, and yeah, again, it's not as big of a deal in 2D games as it is. But I went in to test the build, and I can't talk in detail about it because of NDAs, but I went in to test the build, and the NPCs were not. You have to code the human behavior back in. So I need to write that down. You have to code in behaviors. They don't just happen. You have to code them back in. They don't just happen. So I was testing this build, and the NPCs were talking to each other, but they were expecting a response from me, but they wouldn't look at me. And yeah, it's a NPC, so what does it matter? But actually, when you're in there and you're experiencing it in real life, and big as life, and there are people talking to each other, and they're talking to you, but they won't look at you, that gives you a certain psychological and emotional feeling. And that told me I'm being ignored, I'm being disregarded. And so you really want to pay attention to the behaviors of your NPCs in your games, to act and behave like they would in real life. And yeah, so if that was what you were going for, to make the person feel ignored, because maybe you're doing an empathy video for something, and there are empathy experiences out there where you can put yourself in someone else's shoes and experience life the way that they do. And so in that case, then yeah, you would want them to ignore you, because that's what's happening in real life. But if that's not what is supposed to be happening, you want to make sure that your NPCs are behaving properly and realistic the way they would in real life. So it's very important, and you have to code that back in. It's not something that just comes out of the box. You have to pay attention to it and code it in, which doesn't happen as much in 2D games, but it's vital in immersive experiences. So another thing, the NPC behaviors, and then we wanted to talk about load times. So load times are definitely more important. Load time indicators definitely more important in VR. Since you're immersed. You're immersed in this world. If no indication, if screen just goes black, or if you have a still image stuck to the viewport, makes you feel like it froze. And it can also cause so the image stuck to the viewport can also cause motion sickness or give feeling of vertigo. Especially if there's performance issues. So you want to not do that. And so I talk about that in the load time article. I haven't done the video yet. That's one that I'm going to be doing this month. And if you want early access to that, you can become a patron to get early access to the videos that I make. But yeah, by tier, you have to pay attention to the tier, the Patreon tier. But if the viewport is stuck to, if the image is stuck to the viewport and then there's a bad amount of lag, that gives this rubber banding effect that makes you feel like you got vertigo, and that can make you sick. So the load time indicator is very important to the immersive world. Besides you feeling like something froze, which happens a lot in VR already, so that's where their brain's going to go. You don't want them taking off the headset and quitting the game because they thought that it froze. And another thing that we were thinking about was this whole... So how would you translate this into VR versus mixed reality? There's going to be different things, and we talked about it a little bit last week. And we talked about there are some, and so one of the things we're going to be doing is playing VR experiences to see how they've solved the problem. I currently only have one platformer in VR, but it's an absolutely excellent platformer in VR that we're going to study in a few weeks to see how they solve the problem. But I would say study that one and see how they've solved it. But then what can you do to think outside of that box? Because then that becomes a box, and then all platformers become like that platformer, and maybe we don't want that because we do have this immersive 3D space. What can we do with that? And there are the pros and cons of going first person in the VR platformer versus doing it the way this game did it, and the game I'm talking about is Moss, because they still have third person, so that you're not attached to the camera, which is reducing that motion sickness. There's very little risk of motion sickness in that game. They've done a very good job of it, and that's a platformer that we're going to be studying in a few weeks. But are there any other solutions? Is that the only solution? I hope that's not the only solution. And so that's where we want to think about what are the possibilities here. And I'm wanting y'all to think about what are the possibilities here. Don't put it on just me to think about that. I want you to think about it. What are the possibilities for platformers that solve these problems of motion sickness and reducing motion sickness and making sure that the NPCs are behaving well and so forth and so on? That major issue of that's going to come up in platformers in VR is motion sickness. So how do we solve that? And that is all I can think about for today. So thanks again. Thank you. If you like what you see, please do follow. And if you're watching this on YouTube later, like and subscribe. If you want to continue seeing this, there are multiple ways to support. If you are have funding issues, the free way of helping is to like, subscribe, share, tell your friends, tell your colleagues, and like, subscribe, follow, so forth. And then if you want to support monetarily, you can buy merch. I have merch. I have t-shirts. I'm wearing the hoodie. I have since modified the patch. This is a sample I bought. I modified the patch so it's a little bit smaller, but it came out well. It's a nice warm hoodie. It's soft. This is the small, but I am small. It's a little on the big side, but it is a good comfy hoodie for the people that like comfy hoodies. And the print came out well. And I have t-shirts, and I have a normal hoodie, a pullover hoodie. And I did have a coffee mug, but I got the sample, and the sample's kind of blurry, and I don't want to sell it that way. So I've got to modify that design before I can put it back out. There's a sticker and so forth. And you can buy merch. That'll help. Or you can become a patron and have, there are tiers that you can have exclusive Discord access to my Discord and to make use of it, give feedback, and help me build where this thing's going that we're building here with this Ninja Robot Studio company that I've created, because my goal and my hope is to, my overall goal and hope is to help figure out ways to give you experience, practical experience that you can put on your resume and say, hey, I have experience. Hire me. Here's my experience. That's my goal. And how I do that, I'm still figuring out. But that's my goal. And so if you want to support that effort, you can do that by becoming a patron or buying merch, liking, subscribing, following, sharing, and so forth. And the Patreon does give you benefits. Again, Discord access, exclusive Discord access, and you get a pattern library that I'm creating that's growing over time, where we see how other people have solved problems. For example, how did other people solve this problem of motion sickness in a VR platformer game? How did people solve problems of whatever, NPC behaviors? How have other people solved this? So I'm creating this growing pattern library of this that you have partial access to for free, but full access will give you, a certain Patreon tier will give you full access to all of those patterns that I'm adding to regularly. And early access, or a certain tier, you'll get early access to the educational videos, and the other tier will give you early access to the videos and full access to the library. So all of the tiers give you Discord access. So check that out if you want to support and help, because that is where I'm wanting to go. I'm wanting this to be, although it is an LLC, it is a for-profit company. The goal of this for-profit company is to help you get practical experience. I'm still figuring it out again, and I'm trying to push this UX forward in this space of XR. So this is how I'm trying to do it. And more Patreon benefits will be coming in the future, and more features and content will be coming in the future. But I need to be able to sustain that financially, because I need to also sustain myself somehow. So that's the goal. That's why we have the Patreon. That's why I have these different things, and I will be adding more in the future. More features, more benefits, more content of different kinds. So if you want to help me shape where this goes, these are ways that you can. And that is all I have for today. Thanks again, and have a good week. I'll see you next week. We're going to do another game that keeps the camera separate from the player character. See how they solve that problem. So I will see you next time. Thanks.